This is Roger Blumin, and I will be explaining how to do question 4 from CSE 2's Spring 2014 Exam 3. Let's begin by reading the problem. So the problem asks us to write a static method, overlap, that returns an array of ints, giving all ints common to two arrays, where each array has no repeated ints. The array should be in the form given in question 2, where the number of usable entries is given by the 0th entry. So essentially this question has two parts. The first part is to search through two arrays, find all the duplicate values, and then store that in a new array, store all the duplicates in a new array starting from position 1. And then the other part is to count the number of duplicates and store that in the 0th position of the array. So essentially this question is testing your ability to search through and compare the contents of arrays to find all of the overlapping values and to count the total number of overlaps. So there was one misconception that I had when I first approached the problem. I was unsure what the output would be when empty entries of an array are printed. So what I decided to do is to test this by printing an empty array, and I saw that the output for an empty entry of an array is all zeros. So we could just print the empty entries at the end, and we'll have zeros printed in all the entries as required by the output. So what I've done is I've already created a class, exam question, and a main method, and I've coded the program with the two sample arrays provided in the problem, int array x and int array y, and then I've called the method overlap that we will write. So let's begin writing the method overlap. Its name is overlap, and then it has to accept two arrays of integers. So I'll call them array x and array y. So the first thing I'm going to do in this method is I'm going to create two variables. One will be called count, and what count will do, eventually in my code, it'll count the number of duplicates that we find in the arrays. And then another integer called max. And this variable will be used to store the length of the longer array, which we'll be finding now. So the way I'm going to be finding the length of the longer array is using an if statement. So I'll say if the length of array x is greater than the length of array y, I'm going to make my max equal to x.length. So my max will be the length of x. Now, if this is not the case, I'll have an else, and then the max will be equal to the length of y. So now that we have found the length of the larger array, we can now go ahead and declare the new array that we will be returning in this method, which I'll call result. And remember, it must be an array of ints. Now the length of our array result actually has to be one greater than the length of the larger array, because we have to store the number of duplicates counted in that 0th position of that array. So that's why I'll make it go of size max plus 1. So now we're ready to search through our array and find all the duplicate values. So first what I'll do is I'll write a for loop that'll go through all the contents in array x. So I'll make go from 0 and I'll increment I by 1 every time. Now I'll write a second for loop. And this for loop will go through all the values in array y for every value in array x. So now what I'll do is I'll check to see if my ith position of array x is equal to the jth position of array y. Now, if this is the case, that means we have a duplicate. So we'll count that by increasing the counter by 1. Now recall, we have to put the number of duplicates into the 0th entry of the array. Since this number will change every time there's a new duplicate, we must assign the 0th position of the array result to be equal to the counter variable. And this number will be updated every single time a new duplicate is found. Finally, we have to store all the duplicate values in the new array starting from position 1. I will do this by storing each duplicate in the position that corresponds to the counter variable count. So if it is the first duplicate, count will be 1, and the duplicate value will be stored in the first position of the array. If it is the second duplicate, count will be 2, and the duplicate value will be stored in the second position of the array, and so on. This process will continue all the way until all the duplicate values have been stored in the result array. And remember, the duplicates are either in the ith position of the array x or in the jth position of array y. So you can do either one for this. And now our new array should be completed, and we're ready to return it. So once all the loops are exited, we can go ahead and return our array result. Remember, we're returning an array of integers, which I've created and called result. So I actually just quickly noticed that my array y in the main method is not the same one that is in the problem, so I'm going to quickly change it to match the one in the problem. So it should be 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, and 6. And now we're ready to compile and test our program to see if it works. So I'll go into my terminal, and I'll compile the program. We see that it compiles without any problems. And now I'll run it. And we see we have 2 duplicates, being 10 and 3, and then we print 10, which is the first duplicate in the first position, and 3, which is the second duplicate in the second position. And our output matches the required output, and we've completed the problem. Now, there are some variations of this question that can be asked, and one variation of this type of question could ask you to store the number of overlaps in the last position of the array, and then all the duplicates in the prior positions with zeros stored starting from the 0th position up until the last duplicate, sorry. So this problem can be solved by changing the for loops and making them start at the last position of the arrays, which would be equal to the length minus 1, because remember, the length returns the size of the array, and the array starts at the 0th position. And then the loop can run until the 0th position of the array, and the body of the loop can essentially be the exact same thing. Once again, this is Roger Blumin, and I would like to thank you for watching my video tutorial, and this is CSE2.